Blind date was empty until twin girls walked in and said, "Are you our new mommy?" The morning air was crisp as Lila Sanders stepped into the cozy cafe on 8th and Maple. Outside, the city stirred to life. Inside, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. The scent of cinnamon and espresso filled the space, mingling with soft jazz and golden sunlight spilling across wooden floors. Lila adjusted the collar of her cream cardigan. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, soft wisps escaping to frame her face. She wore a pale lavender dress with tiny white flowers, simple, comfortable, with flats and no makeup. She hadn't come to impress, just to show up. Her best friend had signed her up for this blind date. She hadn't expected much, maybe an awkward conversation, maybe no one at all. But she came anyway, unsure whether it was courage or habit that brought her through the door. Either way, it was a morning that would change everything. So here she was, 28 years old, a children's game designer who mostly worked from her small apartment, living in soft clothes and gentle silences. It had been 2 years since her daughter passed away. Lila still woke up some mornings thinking she heard the faint hum of her heartbeat monitor. Other days, there was only the sound of the wind through the curtains. She walked through the cafe, scanning for the reserved table listed in the message. There it was, by the window, a little glass vase in the center holding 3 tulips, their petals beginning to wilt. She sat down slowly, tucking her bag beneath her chair. The opposite seat remained empty. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She stirred her tea, eyes darting to the door every time it opened. The man, whoever he was clearly not coming. She glanced at the clock. 15 minutes. Maybe she should just leave. With a soft sigh, Lila reached for her bag. That was when she heard the giggles. 2 little girls in matching pink dresses came bouncing in through the cafe door, curls bouncing with every step. They couldn't have been older than 5. Their shoes tapped quickly across the wooden floor until they reached her table. Without hesitation, they slid into the seat opposite her. Lila blinked. "Hi, are you?" The girl on the left, slightly taller, leaned forward, her wide blue eyes fixed on Lila's face. "Are you our new mommy?" she asked, voice full of innocent certainty. Lila froze. Her heart stumbled in her chest. I think you might be mistaken." The other girl, smaller but bolder, added, "Daddy said we're meeting someone special. You look special." Lila opened her mouth, closed it again. She looked around the cafe, half expecting a hidden camera or a prank in progress. Lila sat frozen for a moment, her eyes darting between the 2 identical girls, now sitting confidently across from her at the cafe table. Maddie and Chloe. She could tell them apart only because Maddie had a tiny pink bandage on her elbow. Both had matching pink dresses and sparkling barrettes shaped like stars, the same star-shaped clip she used to put in her daughter's hair. "I'm sorry," Lila said softly, starting to rise from her chair. "I think there's been a mistake." But before she could fully stand, Maddie reached out and gently took her hand. "Mommy always wore her hair like that," the little girl said. Lila blinked. The breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected emotion to come so quickly or so sharp. Her hands slowly dropped back to her lap. At that exact moment, a tall man entered the cafe, pausing briefly near the door as his eyes scanned the room. He spotted them, and his stride lengthened. Lila recognized him instantly from photos. Mark Cole, tech CEO, quiet, sharp, always composed. But right now, he looked slightly flustered. "I'm so sorry," Mark said as he reached the table. He gave a quick glance toward the girls, then at Lila, his brow furrowed with embarrassment. "This wasn't how I imagined this morning would go." "You're late," Chloe said, arms crossed like a miniature judge. "I know," he replied, crouching to their level. "You 2 weren't supposed to come. You promised." Maddie pouted. "You said we'd just wait in the car." "We got bored," Chloe chimed in. Mark stood up, facing Lila again. This was supposed to be a blind date, with someone else. A scheduling mix-up, clearly. I thought it was for an hour later. But here we are. Lila opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. She should walk away. She hadn't signed up for this kind of awkwardness. And yet, she didn't. She looked down at Maddie, who was still holding her fingers. "Will you stay?" the little girl asked, almost whispering. "He's always too quiet when he's alone." Mark didn't interrupt. Instead, he looked at Lila, waiting. Then he quietly pulled out the chair across from her and nodded toward it. "Might as well stay for coffee. They seem to have chosen you." Lila hesitated for a beat, then slowly sank back into her seat. "Just coffee," she said, more to herself than anyone else. A waitress came by, and they ordered breakfast. Pancakes for the girls, a black coffee for Mark, and tea with lemon for Lila. As they waited, the girls began chattering, stories about school, their art projects, how Maddie had accidentally spilled glue on Chloe's favorite sweater but then fixed it with glitter. Lila listened, smiling, asking questions here and there, not forcing anything. Mark watched silently at first, then gradually relaxed. The lines on his forehead softened. His gaze often lingered on Lila, not with appraisal, but with quiet observation. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just was. Lila didn't talk much about herself, but Maddie asked what she did, and when she said she made games for kids, the girls lit up. "Like board games?" "No, like digital ones. On tablets," Lila explained. Mark nodded thoughtfully. "Educational?" "Mostly emotional learning," she replied. "Helping kids name feelings, navigate them." Mark's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Important work." They ate slowly. No one rushed. At one point, Chloe asked if Lila liked puppies, and the conversation spiraled into an enthusiastic debate about whether puppies or ponies were cuter. Lila declared she was Team Pony. Maddie beamed. Eventually, Lila stood up to leave. "Thank you for the unexpected breakfast." As she reached for her coat, she heard Maddie whisper to Chloe, "She smells like Mommy's scarf." Lila froze. Mark heard it too. He met Lila's eyes across the table. There was no smile, just something raw and quiet behind his expression. She gave him a slight nod, then turned and walked slowly toward the door. She did not look back, but the warmth from their voices lingered behind her like a soft echo she couldn't shake. It was Wednesday afternoon when the text came. Lila was cleaning up paper scraps from a prototype game when her phone buzzed. "Mark Cole, there's a school picnic this Saturday. The girls would like you to come. They already told everyone you're their new mommy." Lila stared at the message. Her heart stuttered. She typed a reply, deleted it, then typed again. "I don't think that's a good idea." She hovered her thumb over send, but before she could tap it, another message popped up. "Mark Cole, I know it's a lot. No pressure, but..." Maddie looked very serious when she said it. "I think she really wants you there." Lila sighed. Her fingers hovered again. The words felt too big, too heavy. But when she thought of Maddie's eyes, soft, honest, expectant, she didn't hit delete this time. She typed simply, "Okay, I'll come." Saturday arrived bright and breezy. The park was alive with children's laughter, colorful picnic blankets, and hand-painted signs fluttering in the wind. Chloe and Maddie ran toward her as soon as they spotted her near the gate. "You came," Chloe squealed, wrapping her arms around Lila's waist. Maddie just smiled and took her hand. Mark arrived a few moments later, carrying a picnic basket and looking slightly overwhelmed. "I may have promised brownies," he said, lifting the lid. "They're edible." Lila laughed, surprising herself. "Low bar. Let's go." They found a shady spot beneath a large oak tree. The girls spread out their little tea set and stuffed animals. Lila sat cross-legged on the blanket, watching them play. For a while, it was just laughter, plastic teacups, and stories about school. Then came the moment. Lila heard it before she saw it. A boy, maybe 6 or 7, pointed at Maddie and said loudly, "You don't have a mom. You just pretend." Maddie's face crumpled. Her eyes welled, lips trembling. Lila stood up instinctively and walked over. She crouched beside Maddie, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you okay?" Maddie didn't answer. She just nodded, eyes glued to the grass. Lila turned to the boy. Sometimes, she said, mommies don't live in houses anymore. Some live in the stars. The boy looked confused. And the ones in the stars, Lila continued, her voice calm but firm. They shine brighter than any words. That's where Maddie's mommy is. And that doesn't make her less real. The boy shuffled uncomfortably and walked away. Maddie looked up at Lila, eyes wide, lips still trembling. Is that really true? Lila smiled gently. Yes, and I think she'd be very proud of you. Mark had been watching from a distance, standing silently by a nearby bench. His jaw tightened, not from anger, but emotion. Later that evening, Lila received another message. Mark Cole, you didn't have to say it like that, but thank you. She stared at the words, unsure how to respond. Eventually, she just replied, You're welcome. The next afternoon, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Chloe, standing with a rolled-up paper in her hands. Mark waited a few steps behind her. I made something, Chloe said. It's for you. Lila knelt down and unrolled the paper slowly. It was a drawing, crayon, and markers, childlike, but full of heart. It showed 4 figures, holding hands beneath a big yellow sun. 2 small girls, with identical pigtails. 1 tall man, and a woman with a blonde ponytail. Above it, in colorful block letters, were the words, My family. Chloe didn't say anything else. She just handed it over and hugged Lila tightly. For a long moment, Lila stood there, arms wrapped around the little girl, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. She didn't know what to say. Words felt too small. When she finally looked up, Mark was still there, watching, waiting. He didn't speak either, just gave a small nod. And somehow, it was enough. The scent of cinnamon and sugar floated through the air as Lila stepped into Mark's kitchen. Warm sunlight streamed through the window above the sink, casting a golden glow on the flour-dusted countertops. It was Saturday, the day Maddie and Chloe had been talking about all week. The twins had insisted she come. They needed her expert help for their school's bake sale. Mark had relayed the request with a text that made her laugh out loud. They say you're better than YouTube. Now, the girls stood proudly on chairs pulled up to the counter, aprons hanging crookedly over their tiny frames. Maddie's was decorated with unicorns, Chloe's with cupcakes. Both had flour smudges on their cheeks and chocolate on their fingers. Lila pulled her cardigan off, set it neatly aside, tied her ponytail a bit tighter, and rolled up her sleeves. All right, little chefs, she announced. Let's get baking. The next hour was chaos of the best kind. Batter splattered, sprinkles flew through the air like confetti, and someone, probably Chloe, managed to get frosting in the ceiling light fixture. Lila helped them crack eggs and stir slowly, then not so slowly, until giggles overtook every step. Mark hovered nearby, leaning against the doorway with a mug of coffee in hand, his expression soft. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it was with a small smile that hadn't been there before she entered their lives. As the cupcakes baked and the girls sat licking frosting off plastic spoons, Lila carried the dish towels to the laundry room. It was a small, quiet space, just off the kitchen. She opened the lid of the washing machine, tossed in the towels, and turned to grab detergent. When she saw it, a wicker basket sat high on a shelf above. Something pink and soft peeked out from behind it. She reached up, carefully pulling it down. It was a sweater, child-sized, pale pink, the yarn slightly worn at the cuffs. Her breath caught. It was identical to the one Ava used to wear, the winter before her heart gave out. The same cozy knit pattern, the same faded color. The memory swept in too fast to stop. She clutched the sweater to her chest, not realizing Mark had followed her until he spoke. I used to hide it from them, he said quietly from the doorway. Lila turned. He didn't look upset, just heavy, like something inside him had loosened. They kept asking for her sweater after the funeral. Chloe tried it on once, then cried for an hour. His voice caught. I thought if I put it away, it would help. But some things don't fade. Lila swallowed, her throat thick. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, he said, stepping closer. It's okay. There was a long silence. Then, gently, Mark said, Julia passed away 2 years ago. Breast cancer. It spread fast. We didn't even have time to process it. She was gone. On their birthday. Lila's heart cracked a little deeper. She looked down at the sweater in her arms. They must miss her every day, she whispered. I do too, Mark said. But I don't know how to help them through it. I've tried everything. Books, therapy, distractions. But eventually, we just stopped talking about her. Lila looked up at him. I understand, she said softly. That night, alone in her apartment, Lila sat at her desk long after the world went quiet. She couldn't shake the image of the sweater, or Chloe's round cheeks, Maddie's quiet focus. So she did what she knew how to do. She created. By sunrise, she had designed a small digital game, Feelings Garden, a gentle, interactive world where children could water their emotions like plants. Joy made flowers bloom. Sadness brought soft rain. Loneliness dimmed the skies. But if cared for, the light would always return. She didn't write a message. She simply sent it to Mark. That evening, her phone buzzed. It was a photo. The twins sat curled on the couch, eyes wide. The laptop open between them. Chloe pointed at the screen. Maddie snuggled her teddy bear close. Below it, Mark's message. You're helping us grieve in a way I didn't know how. Lila stared at the screen until it dimmed, then lowered her head onto her desk and cried, for Ava, for Julia, for Mark, for the little girls trying to make sense of love and loss. And maybe, just maybe, for something beginning to heal. The weekend had been peaceful. A quiet Saturday at the park. Lila had packed homemade sandwiches, and the girls brought their favorite dolls. Mark sat with his back against a tree, watching Chloe braid Maddie's hair while Lila gently helped them fix a tiny picnic for the dolls. It had been a moment of simplicity, of laughter and sunlight, so fleeting, no one thought to shield it from the world. But the world had noticed. By Monday morning, the headline was everywhere. Widowed tech CEO, spotted with mystery woman, new romance, or family reboot. The photo was innocent. Lila sitting on the grass, holding a juice box for Chloe while Mark leaned slightly toward her, a soft smile playing on his lips. Maddie was resting her head on Lila's knee. Underneath, the blogger wrote, sources say the woman has been seen at school events and family outings. Has Mark Cole found love again? Or is this just a summer fling? The story exploded. Within hours, gossip sites dug into Lila's past. Her name, once quiet and ordinary, became a search engine suggestion. They wrote about her early divorce, her bankruptcy, her daughter's death. They speculated on her education, pointing out she hadn't finished her degree. One headline, read, Unqualified and under scrutiny. Who is the woman in Mark Cole's life? Lila saw the news while sipping coffee, her hands trembling. She turned off her phone. The silence in her apartment felt louder than any headline. Meanwhile, Mark faced pressure of a different kind. His inbox flooded with messages from board members, investors, advisors. One email read, We advise immediate clarification regarding your relationship with Miss Sanders. Public perception is affecting share sentiment. Another, more direct, You're risking the company for, what, exactly? A woman with baggage and a bad reputation? On Tuesday morning, an emergency board meeting was called. The room was cold, glass walls, dark suits, faces too familiar. Mark sat at the head of the table, unreadable. We believe this situation requires a statement, one board member began. Investors are concerned. They see instability. She's not the one unstable, Mark said quietly. A murmur passed through the room. Her presence in your life, in the company's public image, must be addressed. Another added, At the very least, we need to know, who is she to you? Mark leaned back in his chair, took a long breath, then stood. She's kind, he said. She's honest. She's been through more than most people in this room will ever understand. He paused, met every eye in the room. And if being seen with someone kind and real damages our image, he said, voice rising just slightly, Then maybe the image needs fixing. The room fell silent. Without another word, he collected his things and walked out. Lila didn't hear the knock at first. She was curled on the couch, trying to tune out the chaos with the comfort of silence. But it came again, firm, steady. She opened the door and found Mark standing there, still in his suit, eyes tired. He didn't say anything. He just stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, she let her head rest against his shoulder. There were no headlines here, no press, no cameras, just two people holding on, trying to feel steady in a world that suddenly wasn't. And it was enough. The community center was buzzing with quiet excitement. Posters lined the walls, showcasing vibrant colors and cheerful characters. In the middle of the hall stood a simple booth. No flashy signs, no PR team, just a hand-painted title, Emotion Garden. Lila stood by the table, adjusting the cardboard display one last time. Her hands trembled slightly. This was her first time sharing the game with the world, her world. Not just a portfolio piece, but something she built with grief, love, and all the broken pieces she had carefully stitched into something children could touch and feel. Mark arrived right on time. He held Chloe's hand. Maddie skipped slightly ahead. Both girls wore butterfly clips in their hair, giggling at the oversized smiley face balloons bobbing around the entrance. Lila turned and smiled. "Hi," she said, softer than usual. Mark gave a quiet nod. "You ready?" "No," Lila replied, laughing nervously. "But I'm here." The twins ran straight to the display, where color-coded cards and simple wooden tokens were arranged like a garden. Each flower symbolized an emotion: joy, sadness, fear, surprise. The girls leaned in curiously. "What's this one?" Maddie pointed at a blue tulip. "That's lonely," Lila explained gently. "Sometimes we feel that way, but we don't know how to say it. So this game helps kids show how they feel, even when they don't have the words." Chloe picked up a yellow daisy and whispered, "Happy." "You got it," Lila smiled. More children came over, their parents watching from nearby. Lila explained the rules, how kids could use the garden to track their feelings, talk to their parents, or just play. Mark stood back, hands in his pockets, but his eyes never left her. He watched the way she knelt beside each child, how her voice adjusted with each small visitor. No sales pitch, no rush, just presence, real and whole. The girls played with ease, placing their emotion flowers in tiny baskets, creating colorful mood gardens. At one point, Maddie turned to Lila and said, "Do grown-ups get gardens too?" Lila smiled. "They should." After the demo, as the event wound down, Mark offered to walk her to the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting a warm amber light across the sidewalk. The twins walked ahead, swinging hands and humming a made-up song. Mark broke the silence first. "You built that out of something heavy, didn't you?" Lila nodded. "I had to, or it was going to crush me." Mark looked at her. "It's beautiful." She looked down at the pavement. "Thanks." They walked a few steps more. Chloe turned around suddenly, her eyes bright. "Can we be real now?" she asked. "Not pretend, family?" Mark stopped. Lila's breath caught. She crouched to Chloe's level, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe real takes time," she whispered. "But I'm still here." Chloe nodded solemnly, then ran back to Maddie. Mark watched Lila for a moment. "Thank you," he said softly. She looked up. "For what?" "For giving them something to believe in again. For giving me something to believe in." Lila's chest tightened. She started to reply, but then Maddie ran back, holding a small, crumpled paper. She pressed it into Lila's hand. It was a drawing, a table with 4 chairs. 3 were filled, 2 small girls, 1 woman with golden hair. The last chair had been empty, but now it wasn't. In the center, Maddie had scrawled in shaky letters, "My family." Lila looked at Maddie, who stood quietly, twisting the hem of her shirt. The little girl whispered, "You're what the empty seat feels like when it's finally full." Lila's eyes burned. She pulled Maddie into a hug, held her tightly. Mark stood beside them, one hand resting gently on Lila's back. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Because this wasn't about press, or damage control, or appearances. This was about something quieter, truer, not for them, but for themselves. The backyard was transformed into a sea of pastel balloons, streamers, and laughter. Fairy lights twinkled between tree branches, and a long picnic table stood covered in tiny cupcakes, paper crowns, and glitter glue. A large sign read, "Happy 6th birthday, Maddie and Chloe." Mark stood near the grill, wearing an apron that said, "Girl Dad." It was the first birthday he'd planned without his wife. The thought lingered in the back of his mind like a soft ache. But this year felt different. Not easier, just lighter. The twins ran around the yard in matching pink dresses, their faces painted with butterflies and their arms covered in stickers. They stopped at the gate when Lila arrived. She wore a light floral dress, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she walked up the path, clutching a brown paper bag tied with ribbon. "Lila," Maddie squealed. "You came!" Chloe grabbed her hand and tugged her down. "But don't come as a guest," she said, eyes earnest. "Come as Mommy." Lila froze. She knelt between them, heart in her throat. "I came," she said softly, "because you invited me." Inside the paper bag were 2 handmade dolls. Each one had soft golden yarn hair, pink dresses sewn from scraps of fabric, and tiny embroidered initials, M and C. The girls gasped when they saw them. "They look like us," Chloe said, spinning in a circle. "And they even have matching shoes," Maddie beamed. Lila watched their joy, fingers trembling slightly. These weren't just toys. They were promises, of presents, of remembering. Mark came up beside her, carrying juice boxes and paper plates. "They haven't stopped asking if you'd come." "I almost didn't," Lila admitted. He looked at her, his voice low. "I'm glad you did." The party continued in bursts of cake frosting, musical chairs, and one too many renditions of "Let It Go" sung off-key. Lila didn't stand in the corner. She joined the games. She tied shoelaces. She wiped cupcake off cheeks. She laughed. And this time, she didn't feel like a guest. As the sun dipped below the fence line and the guests began to leave, Mark approached her quietly, holding a small box tied with silver string. "I got you something," he said. "Not because I had to, because I wanted to." Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a simple silver necklace. On the pendant were the engraved words, "Home isn't a place, it's a feeling." She blinked rapidly, her breath catching. Mark cleared his throat. "I used to think home was 4 walls and stability, but it's Maddie, giggling with you in the kitchen. It's Chloe, asking you to braid her hair. It's that look you give me when I forget napkins again." Lila looked up at him. Her hands trembled around the box. "I don't know what this is yet," he continued, "but I know it feels like home." She didn't answer. Instead, tears spilled over as she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him, not out of sadness, not even out of hope, but because, for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to hold on. Nearby, the twins watched with grins that reached their eyes. Chloe whispered to Maddie, "Told you it wasn't pretend." Maddie nodded, clutched her doll tighter, and said, "Now we're really 4." And for once Lila believed it too. The cafe was quieter in the mornings. Sunlight streamed through the large front windows, casting golden rays across the worn wooden floor. Outside, the city hummed softly, cars passing, birds flitting between lampposts, but inside, it was calm, safe. A small bubble of warmth and color in the middle of the bustling street. Near the back of the cafe, a circle of tiny chairs surrounded a soft rug with playful patterns. A small chalkboard stood on an easel nearby, the words, "Emotion Time," with Miss Lila, written in bright looping letters that danced with childlike cheer. This wasn't just any cafe anymore, not since Lila had turned it into something more, part classroom, part sanctuary. Every Saturday morning, the space transformed into a haven for little hearts. Here, children gathered to learn the language of feelings, how to name their sadness, how to recognize their joy, How to understand the tangle of emotions inside growing minds. Lila knelt by the rug, her yellow ponytail bouncing slightly as she leaned over to help a toddler draw a happy face with a piece of chalk. The little boy giggled, his small fingers smudging the eyes. She smiled and gently guided his hand, whispering, "That's perfect. Even happy faces look different sometimes." At the far end, Maddie and Chloe were seated in their self-declared princess corner, hosting a tea party for an army of stuffed animals. Their matching pink dresses puffed as they spun in circles, laughter rising like music. They poured imaginary tea into tiny cups, giggling over invisible cookies. These mornings had become a rhythm for them, a ritual. No announcements, no obligations, just joy, just presence. Then the front door chimed, its familiar bell ringing out. Lila looked up and saw Mark step in, dressed in jeans and a gray sweater, looking wonderfully out of place among the bright colors and toy dinosaurs. He held up a stainless steel thermos, grinning. "You forgot this," he said. Lila let out a small laugh as she stood to meet him. "That's the third time this week." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm starting to suspect sabotage." "Maybe I just like seeing you walk through that door," she replied. He leaned in and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek. "Then I'll keep coming." She smiled, a quiet smile, full of everything they didn't have to say out loud. Mark took a seat near the window and watched her finish her session. He didn't interrupt. He simply observed, the way she crouched to meet each child's eye, the way her voice softened to comfort, the way the room seemed brighter because of her. Later, the four of them gathered at their favorite table. Chloe crawled into Lila's lap, proudly holding up a crayon drawing. "This is me, and Maddie, and Daddy," she said, pointing. "And this is you." Lila looked down at the picture. 4 stick figures standing in front of a little house, hearts drawn in the sky. She felt her throat tighten. Mark leaned closer. "You know, for someone who wasn't looking for a family." Lila reached over and squeezed his hand. "I found one anyway." Outside, life moved forward. But inside, in that little corner of the cafe, time slowed, held together by love, by the sound of laughter, by a chair that was once empty, now filled. Not just filled with people, but with home. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that healing can come from the most unexpected places, and that family isn't always about blood but about love, we invite you to stay with us for more. Every week, Kindness and Love Tales brings you stories of connection, redemption, and hope that linger long after the final word. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you'll never miss a tale that might just change the way you see love. Because sometimes, the right story at the right time is exactly what your heart needs.